People remember the spear, the helmet, the statues of a tall armored goddess, standing with shield in hand and eyes like polished stone. And from that image alone, many assume she was a goddess of war. But Athena wasn't like Ares, not even close. She didn't thrive on bloodlust or chaos. She didn't scream over the battlefield, drunk on carnage. Athena was measured, deliberate, focused. Where Ares represented fury, Athena represented strategy, the calm mind in the heart of battle. But even that only scratches the surface, because she wasn't just a goddess of war. She was the patron of cities, the guardian of law, the spark behind invention and craft. She ruled over justice, wisdom, diplomacy, and design. She was a divine architect of civilization itself. Athena stood for the power of intellect, not just to fight, but to build, to lead, to teach, and when necessary, to defend. Her myths don't always paint her as kind or gentle, but they do paint her as something else entirely, necessary. This is the story of Athena, the goddess of wisdom, strategy, and war, a protector of heroes, a challenger of pride, and a figure who shaped both myth and history more than almost any other Olympian. Athena didn't enter the world the way most gods did. There was no cradle, no mother's arms, no gentle welcome into the halls of Olympus. She arrived with thunder. Her story begins long before her birth, with Metis, the first wife of Zeus, and the tightness of wisdom, cunning, and deep thought. According to the old prophecies, Metis was destined to bear children more powerful than their father. Fearing this, Zeus took a drastic step. He didn't kill her. He swallowed her whole, hoping to contain her power and prevent the prophecy from unfolding. But fate isn't so easily outmaneuvered. Mus lived on inside him, and within the depths of the king of gods, she crafted something. Someone, a daughter, a being of intellect and strength, of clarity and power. And one day, Zeus began to suffer. The pain in his head grew unbearable, a blinding pressure that even the king of gods couldn't withstand. In desperation, he called for Hephaestus, the god of the forge, and ordered him to split open his skull with an axe. And from that divine wound, Athena emerged, fully grown, fully armored, shield in one hand, spear in the other, her war cry echoing across the heavens. No childlike innocence, no uncertainty. She was born in full command of herself, the embodiment of wisdom, order, and the sharp clarity of reason. Unlike other gods who were shaped by their pasts, Athena seemed to arrive already complete, forged like a blade from thought itself. Some later poets described this birth as symbolic, a metaphor for the mind's ability to produce new ideas, sudden clarity, or sharp logic. But to the Greeks, this was divine truth, a literal act of creation, and one that marked Athena as unique among all Olympians. She was not the child of love or passion, but of forethought and fear, a product of strategy and survival. And from that moment on, she would stand at Zeus's side, not just as a daughter, but as his closest advisor. Athena's presence was unmistakable. She wasn't soft-featured like Aphrodite, nor wild like Artemis. She didn't radiate seduction or chaos. She stood tall, firm, and unshaken. Not beautiful in the delicate sense, but striking and commanding. She was most often seen in full armor, a gleaming bronze breastplate, a crested helmet pulled low over her brow, and a spear always within reach. Her shield, the aegis, edged with golden tassels and emblazed with the head of Medusa, wasn't just a tool of war. It was a symbol of terror and divine protection. To look upon it was to feel your courage falter. But even beyond the armor, there were symbols that clung to her image. The owl, wide-eyed and sharp, perched at her side or carved into her temples, a sign of wisdom and perception. The olive tree, which she gifted to Athens, often appeared beside her as a token of peace and prosperity. Her face was calm, controlled, rarely smiling, rarely scowling, the face of someone who could end a war or prevent one with the same steady hand. Athena was often called Parthenos, meaning the virgin. But to the Greeks, this didn't just mean sexually pure. It meant independent, untouched, unclaimed. She belonged to no man and took no consort. Her body and will were her own, unbent by desire or submission. Artists sculpted her with strong cheekbones, intelligent eyes, and a look of constant readiness. She didn't lean or recline. She stood as if always prepared to act or to judge. Her very image became a political symbol, rational, ordered, incorruptible, a model for city-states and philosophers alike. And when people saw Athena in their dreams or on the battlefield, They didn't mistake her for anyone else because no one else could have looked like that. Athena's place in the Greek pantheon was both secure and complicated. She was the daughter of Zeus alone, born without a mother, and yet she carved out a space among the Olympians that few could rival. Zeus favored her perhaps more than any of his other children. She wasn't just a daughter. She was his confidant, his strategist, the one who spoke when others shouted and listened when others schemed. She stood at his right hand, advising him on matters of war, law, and diplomacy. Unlike Ares, her half-brother, Athena, wasn't unpredictable. She was reliable, efficient, and always thinking several moves ahead. She had no husband, no children, no entanglements. While other gods fell victim to their passions, Athena stood apart. Her loyalty wasn't bound to bloodlines or lovers. It was bound to principles, order, justice, and civilization. But that didn't mean she was without connections. Among mortals, Athena formed powerful bonds with heroes. She guided Perseus in his quest to slay Medusa, offered counsel to Heracles in his labors, and stood by Odysseus throughout his long journey home. She didn't just grant them divine favor. She mentored them, helped them think, adapt, and survive. Her alliances weren't limited to mortals. She often worked closely with Apollo, another god of reason and intellect. Together, they represented a kind of enlightened balance, light and strategy, prophecy and logic. But not all Olympians welcomed her with open arms. Her rivalry with Poseidon was fierce, especially when it came to matters of land and honor. The most famous of their clashes came during the contest for Athens, where each god offered a gift to win the city's devotion. But that's for a later chapter. She also stood opposed to Ares, the god of war, blood, lust, and chaos. Where he represented war's brutality, she represented its tactics. Where he fought with emotion, she fought with clarity. They were opposites on the same battlefield, often present at the same conflicts, but rarely aligned. Then there was Aphrodite, goddess of love and sensuality. Everything Athena rejected. The two clashed not only in myth but in spirit. Aphrodite ruled with allure. Athena ruled with respect. They rarely agreed on how mortals should be guided, especially when it came to women. Even her bond with Hera, queen of the gods, was cold. Though both powerful and proud, they rarely worked together unless it served their own ends. In many ways, Athena's greatest ally was her isolation. She didn't rely on others to act or define her place. She moved through Olympus with purpose, detached from petty affairs, and when alliances were needed, she chose them carefully. Athena wasn't loud. She didn't rage like Ares or seduce like Aphrodite. She didn't boast like Hermes or test mortals like Hera. She led with clarity, focused, observant, rarely flustered, and always one step ahead. Her personality was shaped not by emotion, but by principle. She valued wisdom, but not the kind you get from reading scrolls or quoting riddles. Athena respected practical intelligence, street smarts, strategy, cleverness in the face of danger. Whether in war, politics, or daily life, she stood for reason over impulse, order over chaos, and justice over vengeance. As a goddess, she wore many hats, some of which we've already mentioned, each reflecting her dominance over a crucial domain of Greek life. Goddess of wisdom and strategy, Athena was the patron of clarity, logic, and rational thought. In war, she didn't favor brute strength. She favored tactical advantage, plans, formations, ambushes. Those were her weapons. Goddess of war, but not its bloodlust. Unlike Ares, who represented the violent, messy, emotional side of war, Athena represented discipline, planning, and restraint. She was the general, not the berserker, goddess of crafts and civilization. She guided artisans, blacksmiths, weavers, and architects. The Parthenon itself, named in her honor, was a symbol of her influence over culture, beauty, and structure. To her, order wasn't just political, it was artistic, protector of cities. While many gods wandered, Athena stood guard. She was the patron of Athens, yes, but also of the idea of a well-governed city, structured, defended, and guided by intellect, goddess of law and justice. In myths like the trial of Orestes, Athena stood not for revenge, but for a new way of resolving conflict through courts, reasoned debate, and societal order. Her symbols reflected these roles: the owl, wisdom; the olive tree, peace and prosperity; the aegis, divine protection and terror; and her spear and helmet, readiness and authority. Despite her immense power, Athena was not a goddess of fate or magic. She didn't twist the world to her will. She guided it toward better decisions. She didn't interfere with brute force. She offered counsel. To some mortals, this made her feel distant. To others, it made her the most trustworthy of all the gods. She could be harsh, cold even, but her judgments were rarely clouded. She didn't play favorites, and she didn't seek attention. She acted when necessary, spoke when it mattered, and withdrew when the lesson had been taught. If Zeus was the king of Olympus, Athena was its mind. It began not with a battle cry, but with a thread. In the city of Lydia, there lived a mortal woman named Athena, known throughout the land for her exquisite weaving. Her tapestries were unmatched, so precise, so lifelike, that people whispered her skill must have been a gift from the gods. But Athena disagreed. She claimed no divine inspiration, no guidance, no lessons. She was self-taught, she said, and more than that, she boldly claimed she could weave better than Athena herself. The challenge didn't go unnoticed. Disguised as an old woman, Athena approached Athena and warned her to temper her pride. She advised humility, gratitude, respect for the gods who shaped the world and gifted mortals their talents. But Athena stood firm. She didn't flinch, didn't stutter. She doubled down. If the goddess of wisdom wanted to test her, she said, then let her try. And so Athena revealed herself. No disguise, no more warnings, just the full presence of a goddess, proud, poised, and ready to defend her name. The two began to weave. Athena's tapestry depicted the greatness of the gods. Her father Zeus on his throne, Poseidon stirring the seas, and herself standing victorious in the contest for Athens. Around the edges, she wove scenes of mortals who dared defy the gods and the punishments they received. Athena, for her part, chose a different theme. She wove the flaws of the gods, the betrayals, the scandals, the moments when the Olympians abused their power, particularly the many seductions and deceptions carried out by Zeus. Her work was perfect, flawless in technique, bold in subject. And when Athena saw it, she was furious. Not because the work was poor. It wasn't. It may have even been better than her own. She was furious because Athena was right and unafraid to show it. Athena ripped the tapestry to shreds. Then, in a rare moment of divine wrath, she transformed Athena into a spider cursed to weave forever in silence. But even in punishment, Athena didn't destroy her completely. Athena wasn't turned to ash. She was changed, and her name would live on, tied forever to her craft. It was a harsh lesson, but a telling one. Athena didn't demand blind loyalty, but she did demand respect, not just for herself, but for the order the gods upheld. And when mortals forgot that line, she reminded them thread by thread. Hey everyone, just a quick intermission here. I wanted to say thank you for watching this video. It really means a lot to me. Did you know that over 80% of you who are watching right now aren't subscribed to the channel? If you've enjoyed this content so far, it would be incredible if you could hit that subscribe button. It's a small gesture, but it really helps the channel grow and ensures that you won't miss any more of our fascinating stories we explore together. Also, if you're feeling generous, please give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, and share with anyone else who may enjoy it. Your support really does make a difference and keeps the content coming. Thanks again, and let's get back to the story. It's one of the most misunderstood myths in Greek mythology and one of the most haunting. Medusa, the snake-haired monster, the Gorgon whose gaze turned men to stone. But before she was a monster, she was a woman. And before she was cursed, there was Athena. In the older versions of the myth, Medusa was a beautiful mortal priestess serving in Athena's temple. She was devoted, chaste, and honored the goddess through service and worship. But then came Poseidon. Depending on the telling, Poseidon seduced or assaulted Medusa within Athena's temple, a violation of sacred space that could not be ignored. Yet, instead of punishing the sea god, Athena turned her wrath on Medusa. She transformed the young woman's hair into venomous serpents and cursed her with a gaze that turned all who looked upon her to stone. Some see this as a harsh punishment, Athena blaming the victim. But others, especially in later interpretations, offer a different reading, that Athena's curse was actually a protection, a way to shield Medusa from ever being harmed again. No man could ever touch her. No god could ever overpower her. She would never be vulnerable again. Still, Medusa was exiled, isolated, feared, and eventually she was hunted by Perseus, who carried Athena's shield, the polished aegis, which allowed him to look upon Medusa's reflection without being turned to stone. It was Athena's guidance that made the slaying possible. But it didn't end there. After Medusa's death, Athena placed her head on the aegis itself, turning it into a weapon of fear and power. The image of Medusa, once a mortal, then a monster, would live on as a symbol of protection, vengeance, and divine wrath. The myth remains controversial. Scholars and storytellers have debated it for centuries. Was Athena cruel? Was she upholding sacred law, or taking out the gods' failings on a mortal scapegoat? We don't get a clear answer, but the story remains layered, tragic, and unforgettable. And Athena's role in it reminds us even the goddess of wisdom doesn't always act with kindness. Sometimes she acts with purpose, and sometimes purpose leaves scars. Long before Athens became the shining jewel of ancient Greece, it was just a nameless city nestled near the sea. Its people were proud, its location strategic, and its future uncertain until two Olympian gods set their sights on it. Poseidon, god of the sea, and Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, both wanted the city as their own, but only one could be its patron. The people of the city were caught in the middle. So, the gods struck a deal. They would each offer a gift, and the city would choose which was more valuable. Poseidon went first. With a mighty strike of his trident into the ground, he summoned forth a spring of water, a dazzling display of his power. But when the people tasted it, they found it was salt water, undrinkable, and of little use in land. Then Athena stepped forward. She planted something humble, an olive tree. No thunder, no crashing waves, just roots in the earth and branches reaching toward the sky. But the gift was practical. Olives could be eaten, pressed for oil, used for medicine, and even fuel. It symbolized peace, prosperity, and long-term growth. The people chose wisely, and the city was named Athens in her honor. Poseidon, furious at the rejection, flooded the surrounding lands in retaliation. But Athena stood firm. She became the city's protector, guiding it not with storms or threats, but with culture, governance, and ingenuity. Her temple, the Parthenon, would later rise on the Acropolis, its very architecture a testament to her influence. The olive tree she planted is said to still stand on that hill today. This wasn't just a story about gifts. It was a story about what kind of power truly lasts. Poseidon offered spectacle. Athena offered sustainability. And in choosing her, the people of Athens declared what kind of future they wanted. One rooted in wisdom, not just wonder. The house of Atreus was cursed, a bloodline soaked in betrayal, vengeance, and tragedy. And at the heart of that curse stood a man named Orestes, son of Agamemnon and Cleides. His story began in blood. When Agamemnon returned home from the Trojan War, he was murdered by his wife Clytemnestra and her lover Aegisthus. Years later, Orestes returned to avenge his father's death, and in doing so killed his own mother. It was vengeance, it was justice, but it was also betrayed, one of the gravest crimes in the ancient world, and the Furies came for him. These ancient spirits of retribution hunted Orestes relentlessly, tormenting him with madness. No temple offered sanctuary. No god could silence their fury. Orestes was trapped, torn between the duty to avenge his father and the guilt of murdering his mother. So he turned to Athena. She did not dismiss the cries of the Furies, nor did she declare Orestes innocent on her own authority. Instead, she did something revolutionary. She created a court on the hill of the Areopagus in Athens. Athena assembled the first jury, a council of citizens tasked with weighing the evidence and delivering a verdict. The Furies argued that the blood of a mother could never go unanswered. Orestes' defense, guided by the god Apollo, claimed that his act was justified, that the bond of father and son outweighed the bond of mother and child. The jury was split, and when the votes were counted, they were tied. Athena cast the final vote in favor of mercy. She absolved Orestes, ending his torment, but she didn't discard the Furies. Instead, she transformed them from vengeful spirits into the humanities, the kindly ones. They would no longer chase blood for blood, but become guardians of justice and moral order. It was a turning point in mythology and in the idea of civilization itself. For the first time, divine vengeance gave way to law. Retribution was replaced with reason. And Athena in her wisdom showed the world a different kind of power. Not the power to punish, but the power to judge. The Trojan War wasn't just a clash of mortals. It was a divine chessboard, and Athena had her hand on nearly every piece. Her involvement began long before the first spear was thrown. At the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, the goddess Ares, uninvited and bitter, tossed a golden apple into the crowd, inscribed with the words, "To the fairest." 3 goddesses stepped forward to claim it: Hera, Aphrodite, and Athena. All 3 believed they deserved it. All 3 demanded it. And a mortal prince named Paris was chosen to decide. Athena offered him power, wisdom in war, unmatched glory in battle. Hera offered him political dominion, rule over all of Asia. Aphrodite promised him love, specifically the love of Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose Aphrodite, and that decision changed everything. Athena didn't forget the insult, and when Helen was taken to Troy, triggering war between the Greeks and the Trojans, Athena took up the Greek cause, not just for vengeance, but because she saw Troy as arrogant, corrupt, and doomed to fall. Throughout the war, she became the mind behind the muscle. While Ares reveled in bloodlust, Athena favored precision, discipline, and victory through strategy. She personally guided warriors like Diomedes, who was granted the rare ability to see gods on the battlefield. With Athena's help, Diomedes wounded Aphrodite and even struck Ares himself. She stood beside Achilles, the spearhead of the Greek army, and whispered clarity into his moments of rage. She brought reason when chaos boiled too hot, pulling gods and mortals alike back from the edge. But Athena wasn't above vengeance. When Ajax the Lesser defiled her temple during the sack of Troy by dragging Cassandra from her altar, Athena responded with fury. She cursed Ajax's journey home, ensuring his fleet would be scattered and his death would be slow and ignoble. To Athena, war was never sport. It was never for pride. It was a test of strategy, loyalty, and restraint. And those who failed that test paid dearly. Among all the mortals Athena guided, protected, and championed, Odysseus stood above the rest. He wasn't the strongest of the Greeks, not the fiercest or the most noble, but he was clever, calculating, cunning in a way that didn't rely on brute force, but on timing, restraint, and insight. In other words, he reminded Athena of herself. Their connection truly began during the Trojan War, where it was Odysseus who devised the idea of the Trojan horse, a masterstroke of deception that finally brought the war to an end. While others were hacking through enemy lines, Odysseus played the long game and Athena approved. But it was after the war that their bond was truly tested. Odysseus's journey home, the Odyssey, was a brutal gauntlet of curses, monsters, temptations, and divine grudges. And Athena, more than any other god, was the silent hand guiding him through it all. She calmed storms Poseidon had stirred. She whispered ideas into his mind when hope was nearly gone. She disguised him when he needed to hide, and revealed his true form when the time was right. She stood by his wife Penelope, encouraging her loyalty and cleverness, while Odysseus wandered in exile. And when he finally returned to Ithaca, Athena didn't just clear the path, she orchestrated his revenge. Disguised once more as a beggar, he entered his home unseen. But it was Athena who gave the signal when it was time to strike. She stood beside him as he loosed his arrows, punishing the suitors who had tried to steal his throne, his name, and his wife. Their relationship wasn't warm in the human sense. There were no embraces, no emotional speeches, but in every moment that counted, she was there. Because Athena didn't favor mortals for their strength. She favored those who listened, who thought, who made hard choices without losing themselves. And in Odysseus, she saw a man who didn't just survive the gods' games. She saw a man who participated in them actively. Athena is often remembered as a serene figure, wise, composed, and eternally rational. And while those traits are accurate, they don't tell the whole story. Over time, modern retellings and simplified portrayals have given rise to a few major misunderstandings about who Athena truly was. One of the most common misconceptions is that she was simply a goddess of wisdom, as if that was all she embodied. In truth, Athena was the goddess of applied wisdom, wisdom in action. This included strategy, invention, architecture, politics, and yes, war. She wasn't just a thinker, she was a doer. She didn't merely advise kings and heroes, she shaped their outcomes with calculated force. Athena led troops into battle. She wore armor, she carried a spear and shield. She wasn't a bystander of conflict, she mastered it. Another frequent misunderstanding is that Athena was cold or emotionally detached. It's true she avoided romance and never took a lover, but that doesn't mean she lacked care. Her form of love was different. She was a mentor, a protector, a silent guardian. She stood by heroes like Odysseus and Perseus, not out of passion, but out of belief. Belief in their potential and in the values they represented. She could be stern, but she could also be patient, kind, and even humorous in her own restrained way. Modern retellings, especially those that blend Greek mythology with Christian or horror tropes, sometimes even cast Athena in a negative light, as overly punitive or jealous. The Medusa myth, in particular, is often misrepresented. In some versions, Athena punishes Medusa out of spite. But in older tellings, her actions were driven by divine law and the sacred rules of her temple. She didn't lash out irrationally. She upheld a code even when it was brutal. Athena has also been portrayed as anti-woman because of her virginity and her occasional siding with men over women in disputes. But this too is a distortion. Athena didn't reject womanhood. She represented an alternative path for women in a patriarchal world. Independence, authority, and power without needing to be defined by love or motherhood. In the end, Athena wasn't flawless. She could be rigid, unforgiving. She didn't always show mercy, but she was never petty, never cruel. Everything she did came from a place of balance, from the weight of duty, justice, and clarity. She wasn't just a goddess of wisdom. She was wisdom with a spine. In a pantheon crowded with thunder and fire, with chaos and passion, Athena stood apart. She didn't scream for attention. She didn't chase adoration or vengeance. She wasn't driven by hunger, lust, or rage. Her strength came from stillness, from watching longer, thinking deeper, and choosing her moments with purpose. She was the one the heroes turned to when brute force wasn't enough. The one who whispered strategy when others roared for blood. The one who could end wars with a word, or win them with a plan. Athena never needed to dominate. She didn't need to prove herself through destruction. Her victories came through wisdom, clarity, and control, and in a world ruled by impulse and pride that made her a different kind of divine. She was protector and punisher, mentor and warrior, virgin and mother figure. She was complex, sometimes distant, sometimes fiercely involved, but always measured, always intentional. Where others demanded loyalty, Athena earned respect, and long after the temples fell and the old hymns faded into silence, her symbol, her wisdom, her name remained. This was Athena, daughter of Zeus, born of thought, armored in reason, the goddess who chose mind over muscle. And though she never ruled Olympus, she may have been its sharpest voice.